What makes the achievement of emotional sobriety so difficult is the habits we have, the patterns we have in our behavior, the habitual ways that we've come to think about things. We have to really become aware of those things in order to challenge them, because the consciousness that has created a lot of the problems in our life cannot solve it, cannot change things. So what happens is the first step is waking up. Here we are on step number 4, which we talked last time about the first real tangible evidence of our commitment, right, in what we do. And Herb was generous enough to offer to bring to us now the way that he presents this 4-step inventory in his 12-step workshop. So Herb, with no further ado, I'll turn the meeting over to you.
Well, thank you. And I am going to use a PowerPoint here just to guide me and to basically contain me so that I can give a sense of and taste of step 4 material, not with, as we talked about earlier, any type of a deep teaching, but an overview to kind of stimulate your thinking and to give it a context. And you said some things in your opening comments, Alan, and I'm always looking for purpose. What's the purpose of this? And you said we're talking about, in these series, emotional sobriety. We're talking about self-esteem. And now we're introducing the steps as a methodology for identifying and fostering both emotional sobriety and self-esteem. And you made mention of the integrated man, of course. This is the integrated approach to all of this: emotional sobriety, self-esteem, and the steps, which is a particular method. Step 4 made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Moral is stressed here in my slides, because it's not in contrast to immoral. Step 4, inventory. It's moral means values. What are the values that guide me, whether they're conscious or unconscious? We all have values. And the step 4 process, as at least I've experienced it, has surfaced for me underneath my unconscious principles, beliefs, and values and motives that were never available to me. And once I was able to see them, I was able then to manage and or have them transformed. Bill, in the big book, talks about a spiritual arch through which we walk to a new freedom. And this gives us, again, the context so that we have a big picture as to how this all fits together. That first step is a foundation: complete defeat, implosion, surrender. I need help at the simplest level. I cannot do this by myself. I make a decision in step 2, a willingness to believe that there is a power available. The silver bullet of the 12-step fellowship is, and you choose. We have no opinion. We have a suggestion. You choose what power means. And this is the cornerstone of this spiritual arch through which we walk to freedom. Step 3, a decision to have a relationship with that power. Number 1, I need help. Number 2, help's available. Number 3, I'm going to ask for help. A decision to turn and to take some actions. Bill calls that the keystone. But the very next step, step 4, I want to look at it in 2 phases. Tonight, I want to look at resentment. Next week, I think Alan and I have agreed, and he's invited me to talk about the balance of step 4 in a summary fashion, like I hope to do tonight. And that is about fear and about sex and about dishonesty and secrets and about guilt and shame, so that we can have freedoms and walk through the arch. The whole point of this is not to do therapy and psychology, although we will be doing all of that, doing the 4-step if we do it the way I've experienced it, deeper than I've ever experienced before, because I want freedom from my addiction, but also freedom from my unmanageability, freedom from my self-centeredness. Bill suggests that self-centeredness is, in fact, the root cause. Anybody who doubts that, look on page 62. Selfishness of the big book. Selfishness dash self-centeredness. This, we think, is the root, I'm quoting, the root of our problems. Well, if that's the root, it's buried like all roots are under earth. We don't see them, but we could look at the fruits. Resentment is that reaction of anger, fear, that reaction of hiding, running, the sex and dishonesty, secrets, guilt and shame. Those are all behaviors coming out of our inability to deal with reality. We hide, fight, flight, and freeze. I want to focus on resentments. Well, what does it mean? I have a exposure to some languages that help me get to the derivatives. Where does resentment come from? It comes from the word sentire, meaning to feel. And when you put an RE in front of it, it means to re-feel it. 1988, I was doing this work for the first time, 4 years sober. I had a deep, visceral hatred for my father, and he was already dead 12 years. Refeeling anytime I thought about him, refeeling anytime I talked about him, refeeling anytime I saw pictures of him. This deep volcanic rage. Well, Bill says, name it. You might do this if you have an anger and or a resentment and or a negative feeling about something or somebody. I'm asking you right now as sort of a sing along. Put down in writing, put it down. Who are you pissed at? Whether that's yesterday or 40 years ago. Mom and dads normally make the list. Why? Why are you angry? Well, he gives us a third column in the big book. I'm not going to give an extended teaching on it, but I do want to get to the highlights of it in a minute to discover the beliefs. How do we come to our beliefs? And then to uncover our motives. Bill asks us a series of questions and gives us a series of pieces of information. I'll show you a chart on it, but I'm not going to work you through it. Self-esteem. How should I be treated? And you've heard Dr. Berger and the rest of the team here talk about shoulds. It's the key to surfacing my beliefs. I did not know that I did not know. I could not see that I did not see, despite a vast education and self-reflection and lots of therapy, lots of good therapy by good people, lots of understanding of psychological dynamics. And when I went through this, I was able to see, when I have a resentment toward Bob, who's a coworker of mine, a colleague of mine, a senior officer, as I am a senior officer, and he's trying to get me fired, I put myself on a stage. This is a technique that will really help you make it real and concrete, bring you to an understanding of something deep down inside of you that has been boiling, bubbling, and you've not been able to resolve it. Put yourself on a stage. with the person with whom you have a resentment, or the circumstances with whom you have a resentment, and be looking at that person in the eye. I'm on a stage with Bob, I'm looking Bob in the eye, and he is saying, I want you fired. And I am saying, oh my God, Bob, I'm the best salesman that you have. I'm the best salesman in this company. Quite frankly, I'm the best salesman in Los Angeles. Well, you can see point counterpoint. He wants me fired because he doesn't think so. I have this grandiose vision of who I am, which I really do believe is real. First time I wrote it out, it was embarrassing to write it out. The man said, stretch it. What do you want when you walk in and meet Bob? I said, I want respect. He said, is that all? He said, stretch it. I want deference. When Bob walks on the stage to see me and he walks up to me, I want him to back up just a little bit and bow his head and lower his eyes and give me deference. Oh, okay. What's your fear, Herb? That he will disrespect me. How about others? How should others treat me? Well, when I walk into a room for a meeting, I'm always on time, and there's 20 people in the room, men and women. I want them to catch their breath. He's here. And I want the women and the men to stand up, and the women to curtsy and the men to bow, because the king has arrived. Now, I'm giving you such a distilled version. That took me many weeks, many months, and lots of coaching to come to the acknowledgement of this very embarrassing information, which was 100% true. The man said to me that was guiding me, you have a little king down inside of you. And I said, not so little. How should life treat me? I discovered that I really did believe I was entitled, that I was exempt, that I was special, that I was unique, that I was deserving. Now, again, weeks and lots of conversation and lots of writing and a little prayer to help me come to these summary conclusions. But the key here, you're on a stage with this person or this circumstance, and you're asking the question about, how do I want to be treated by this person? And then expand it. In this theater, there's a stage, we're on it, but who's in the theater watching this? How do you want other people to see this person treating you? I want to see this person treating me with deference, with the sense of grandiosity that I deserve, the sense of reward and placement that I deserve. Life should be fair. I should get what I want. I should be seen for the person I want to be seen for. Again, the word should will reveal to you at least what your belief is. And then you can look at it and say, is this reasonable? Is this objective? Is this the truth? More often than not, I found it to be a lie. What I thought to be the truth turned out to be a lie. This is the worksheet I use. We'll send it out to you to take a look at if you're interested, or you can go to my website, herbk.com, and it's in what's called the Way of Life document. And that will be very helpful, although you probably can't navigate it on your own. It's meant to be something that you can do on your own. The words are very clear, the instructions are very clear, but the implications are so contrary to the normal way we look at reality that normally people need some help with it from people who have already had the experience and what I call to be the turnaround. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. The fourth column. In the big book, there's no fourth column, but we turn a paragraph with some instructions into a fourth column to ask what my motives are. What is my unhealthy thinking? My unhealthy thinking is I'm the center of the universe. No, I'm not just the center of my universe. That's healthy. I'm the center of the universe. And I did not know that until I discovered that here in these questions in prayer and in direction and guidance with somebody who understood this process and himself had had that experience. What am I doing? In contrast to what am I thinking? When I have a resentment toward Bob, it's because I want to get the promotion in the office. What am I doing? I'm creating controversy. I'm delegating inappropriately. I'm treating my subordinates as furniture in the room. If they're helpful, I treat them well, and if they're not helpful, I ignore them. I'm not there to augment the business of the company and to create stockholder value. I'm there to get as much power and prestige and money and adulation as I can. And I was not absolutely unaware of any of this until I was aware of it. What is my fear? My fear is not only will I not be seen for who I am, I'm going to actually not get the promotion. Well, what's my fear about not getting the promotion? I'll have a local boss that looks over my shoulder and sees that I'm not living up to expectations, and I'll get fired. I'll get demoted at the very least. Where am I being dishonest? Well, with everybody. My subordinates, my colleagues, my leadership. I am not honest with anybody. I'm manipulating to get what I want. Again, 4 years sober, seeing this for the very first time. What is my role? The final question is, and you hear it in the rooms if you're in a 12-step meeting or a 12-step fellowship, what's your part in your resentment? It's a decent question. I understand the spirit of it, but once I had this experience, I realized I don't have a part in my resentments. I do not have a part. I have 100%. Whose resentment is it? Whose reaction is it? Bob is just Bob. Oh, Bob's a sick person. I mean, there was no question in my mind about that. And he was myopic with regard to his evaluation of me. There's no question about that. But he did see me for who I was, a insensitive, self-serving, untreated narcissist. Now, I knew none of that at that time until I did this work. My role, my part, I have 100% of my resentment. Bob's just doing what Bob does. My company just does what the company does. My wife just does what my wife does. My father just did what he did. And I'm reacting to it. I don't have a percentage of reaction. I have 100%. This is really hard information for people to hear who have been victimized legitimately, maybe even criminally victimized. It is true, but it's history now. And to the extent that I hold on to my memory or my imagination or my victimhood, I am the perpetrator. My role today is to release my reaction, to reframe my story so that I can, in fact, have some freedom. This is a similar worksheet. I'm not going to go through it again, but I gave you the basics of it, those 5 questions. They're surfacing my motives. So just as a summary, the first worksheet surfaces my beliefs so that I can see them, looking at my perceptions on one hand and my fears on the other hand, analyzing in terms of the thinking part of it, but then going to my feelings as to the fears. And it was actually when I looked at my fears about what I thought that the truth got through the crack, because my fears revealed to me the lie of what I was thinking, what what actually turned out to be delusions. I'm going to save this for next time. So the bottom line was that I was able to take a look at how I thought and how I felt, and especially how I behaved, get underneath the surface of it so that I could see the beliefs that generated all of that turned out to be a lie. I had thought they were the truth. What I believed, I thought was the truth. I mean, I could have taken a lie detector test on it. It turned out to be mostly a total lie. And truths that I never had looked at turned out to be the truth about my situation, the truth about my thinking, the truth about my feelings, and the truth about my behavior. And once I was able to accept that truth, I was able to not be a victim ever again. I cut the puppet strings to circumstances, peoples, and events. I no longer am managed by people, circumstances, and events. To the extent I was, certainly, at a very minimal level today. If I have a disturbance today, any type of a negative reaction today, I can take a look at it. So what am I expecting? What is my should? What is the lie? And what is the truth? And I'm able to restabilize myself. That's a short circuit version. How did I do? Yeah, it's probably stayed within the parameters. Does that help, Alan? You're muted,
You're
Alan.
muted now.
Yes, that helps very, very, very much. So, look,
reality is a bitch, but it's the only place that I can actually live with a sense of serenity.
Yeah. Well, to the point of emotional sobriety, in unpacking resentment really helps us see this. See, one of the themes that and we talk about so much, that a big part of our emotional dependency means that we make whatever happens about us.
Yeah, we take it personally.
We take it personally. And see, that's what Bill captured with the focusing on what did this do to yourself, right? That's what he was getting at. Well, my God, it reflects on poorly on me, or whatever way we take it. So the importance of unpacking these things is to see just how deeply rooted we take things personally. This sense of personal importance, like you said, a lot of us unconsciously claim a special status in life. Mm-hmm. I should be treated the way I think I should be treated. And when you don't, you are violating that unenforceable rule, right? And of course, don't you know, I get to set the rules. I mean, I get to play God. We talk about that all the time, on how one of the things that's revealed to us. I mean, for me, when I did this step, first of all, I didn't have the consciousness of emotional sobriety I have today. Right. But one of the things that jumped out was how myself kept showing up in everything I wrote about. My self-centeredness was there in spades. Now, today, I can understand that in a whole different way. So that's one point. The second point I wanted to make, and I love that you made it at the end, it's a very interesting thing that happens here. Because in one way, an inventory is to discover what's there, right? That's what, if I take an inventory in a store, and I have a grocery store, how many boxes of Frosted Flakes do I have? How many boxes of Grape Nuts? How many boxes of Captain Crunch? Oh, that was one of my favorite cereals when I was growing up. I loved Captain Crunch, especially how the milk would get that flavor.
You're being distracted, Alan.
Oh, I am being distracted. So we take an inventory, right? We think we're now counting things, but the inventory we're doing here, and you brought it up very well, it's like we see that some of our values are a result of the lens we're looking through with our false self.
Yeah.
So the things we were judging ourselves for were not relevant. They do not define who we are. In fact, they define who we thought we should be.
Yeah.
but not who we are. And see, I love what you said about this, because what this inventory does, it kind of clears away. It's like when you had your surgery on your cataracts.
Yeah.
It takes the cataract off the lens,
That's
and
it.
we start to see ourselves, maybe for the first time in our life,
Oh, there's no question. The
more
first.
realistically, more
Yeah.
real,
Yeah.
more authentically,
Yeah.
and more grounded in reality than we've ever seen. Because
Right.
remember, the false self is a fantasy.
Yeah.
We have created, we live in a fantasy. We do not live in the world. We create a trance for ourselves and we put ourselves right in it. And so I just love this point, because that's what the inventory is doing. It's really opening up an experience with ourselves that we've never had before.
Yeah. And I do use that metaphor. You've heard me use it in terms of the lens. If I had the misfortune of having an optometrist that had miscalculated, I would be looking through lenses and I wouldn't be seeing reality as it is. I would be seeing reality as my lens is. So my belief is my lens. And if my belief is distorted, my perception of reality is going to be distorted.
And my values are going to be distorted. See, that's the
100%.
point. See,
Yeah.
that's the point. That's why I love when you said, think of morals as
Yeah.
values.
Yeah.
But then when we think about it this way, we are not talking about absolute values that are true in an absolute sense. These values were very, very much influenced by our psychology, by
Right.
who we thought we were supposed to be okay.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing, is seeing that is such an important part of self-discovery.
Yep.
It's very exciting. Thank you, Herb.
Tom, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think I just figured it out.
Oh, good.
Oh, I
Enlighten
get it.
us.
It's the fucking glasses. It's like, I'm going to say something just to kind of dog you. This is so cool. I love what you presented here, Herb, and I often will begin by saying I'm going to be brief, and then I'm not. I'm going to do my best to be brief, because I want, and we'll be talking about this more next week. So I'm going to talk about this more then. But I always want to balance out whenever we're talking about, inflated egos and arrogance and all this other stuff. I always want to just, kind of volunteer myself for the example of the egomaniac with low self-esteem. The person that basically the reason I can look back and know that how arrogant I was, and because guess what I saw everywhere I looked when I was in my shit the most. I saw arrogant people. I mean, God damn those arrogant people. They just pissed me off like nobody's business. And it's like, I had not a clue until we get to this kind of evaluation and this kind of inventory, how my particular arrogance was working. And so I want to talk about that more next week. I'm going to make some notes about it, but I love what you're talking about here. Herb, thank you.
Boy, that's really important, Tom, though, right? Because
Mhm.
it's all about me syndrome.
Oh
Yeah.
God.
You just really,
I am the piece of shit the world revolves around.
Yeah.
or
It's-
I'm the wonderful one. The world. See, it's just the other side.
It's the same
coin.
thing.
Yeah.
It's the same.
Yeah.
It's all about me.
Mhm. That's
We,
it.
we had the same instinct here, Tom, because just, I talk about balance a fair amount, and
Mhm.
because your examples are so personal and so authentic, Herb, with regard to the grandiosity piece, and I'm the best salesman in Los Angeles.
Mhm.
I was going exactly the same way you were, Tom, in
Mhm.
part for all the participants in the meeting who can't relate to that style so well, but relate to the other style,
Mhm.
which is right self-demeaning, self-dismissing, self-subtracting. So I'm struck that because in terms of bringing self-esteem into this, both the grandiosity and the subtracting of ourselves, as Alan likes to talk about it,
Mhm.
are both reflections of a sense of inadequate self-worth.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
They're both reflections of a deeply experienced insufficient
and reflections of an inflated sense of self-importance
in the sense of it's about me, just the way you're talking about, Alan's talking about, Herb's talking about. We don't see it that way when I'm in the race to be last rather than the race to be first, right? And
that's right.
Nathaniel used to talk about that, Nathaniel Brand. We can be motivated powerfully around either one. I may have a huge investment in never being in the spotlight because then nothing's expected of me, right? In a positive sense, if there is in the of expectation, I don't aspire to anything. I love the examples you give, Herb, about imagining yourself on a stage with that circumstance or that event or that person, and then take it to the hilt. I know Alan teaches this a lot in the therapeutic approach, the Gestalt approach. Exaggerate it, intensify it, get ridiculous with it. That's what will really start to allow us a glimpse, because our blinders are so profound that unless we exaggerate the tendencies, we're unable to experience them, because they're our constant companion. They're where I come from in my life. That's why it's called, go ahead, Herb.
No, what happened when he not only encouraged me, he was really forcing me to exaggerate. And when I exaggerated and then stepped back, he said to me, "How does that feel?" I said, "Well, that wasn't much of an exaggeration because it was what I wanted."
Well, that's right. That's right. So, and it can be hard to do that. When I ask myself or I ask clients to do that, it feels awkward. But the thing with, from a psychological perspective, we talk about personality disorders. It's just another way of talking about these filters, because when that style runs deeply enough for us, we are so identified with it. We are so convinced that is who I am that we can't see it. It's like a fish in water, water, right? It's like, that's exactly. And I try to stay mindful of that for myself, but it's incredibly hard. I try to stay mindful about how on either of these extreme positions, whether it's the, self-debasement or the aggrandizement, they're both the same thing, two sides of the same coin, as we talk about. And it can, but the point I'm making is it can be incredibly, as you've all made, it can be so hard to see it. So hard to see it. So I love it that you're focused on the idea of being on that stage. How do I want this person to see me? How do I want the people in the audience to see me? And I love it that you got down to, what am I afraid of? What are my fears? Because that's one of the questions that I have found most helpful to myself.
That was the question that cracked it for me.
Right. What am I afraid of? And what I'm afraid of is pain. Some form of pain, right? Isolation, disconnection, lack of self-connection and lack of self-support. What I'm afraid of is some form of pain. So I'll hide from that in my grandiosity, or I'll hide from that in my, tight little cocoon I've wrapped myself in where no one will see me. And that is the goal, right? Because then it's like, I don't have to disappoint anyone. Or whatever, I can have a dozen motives around that, not just fear of disappointing someone. But the idea, I love it. You're focused on intent or motive. You're focused on what am I afraid of? These are, and I use with my clients or myself, I use a lot of incomplete sentence work to try to move from unconscious to conscious with all of that material. So I just want to add to Tom and Alan's voices. Thank you so much, Herb, for starting to open this discussion about our resentments and becoming much more conscious and open, not necessarily enacting them toward other people, but owning them right within ourselves, right? Acknowledging them out loud.
Well, and going back to what Alan had taught me about, I used to call them ego defense mechanisms, these instincts that we're talking about, anger, for instance, here. And he just said, no, Herb, today we talk about unhealthy coping strategies. That's all it is. There's no moral value to it. There's an explanation. We were just trying to be survival and to be safe.
pedaling as fast as we can is the way I like to put it, in circumstances that often felt very dire to us and may have been extremely dire for us. Yeah.
Yeah. But they lose their meaning, but they've been recorded in our cellular structure at the deepest level. And until we surface them, we can't reframe them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
That's right. Yeah, that's when a new narrative becomes possible.
That's it.
Right. See, it's that, we talk a lot about what's your story? What's your story?
Yes.
But your story isn't really your story. Your story is the meaning you've given to your experience.
Yeah, that's it.
And when you change that lens, my God, the narrative changes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so powerful. I mean, you've seen it. Look, the narrative in your life, I witnessed how that changed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable. And this guy, I think it might have been Sheldon Kopp, and I'm not 100% sure of this, but he wrote a book called Man the Manipulator, or it could have been Shostrom. And it was very interesting thing that, because he took all of these things, like he took the self-aggrandizement that we talked about, right? That kind of person that just thinks, well, it's all about me. And he says, when that's not integrated, then it becomes, we impinge on the rights of others with it. He says, but when you start to integrate it, you now become a leader. And what we call in the archetypes, 4 archetypes for men, you become a king, where you bring wisdom, nobility, justice to the situation. So all of these things that were once maladaptations can't, and I've witnessed this in your life, what you called your narcissism, you're now a phenomenal leader of these workshops, and that you're helping a lot of people, find a real depth to their recovery.
Yeah.
And that's what we see that we can turn lead into gold. We can. That's the alchemy that we find in this program.
Yeah.
It's very exciting. All right, well, let's open this up, and what a great kickoff here, man. Good kickoff. Look forward to next week.
Hey, Alan, can you just restate what you'd like people to focus on when they?
Well, what I'd like people to focus on is to ask questions here about furthering their understanding of the process that Herb talked about. So if they want to relate a specific to that process, that's fine. But the focus here is practical, right? We want to make this very practical, these next few workshops, and learning how to do this. Because being able to examine ourselves and discover these things becomes so critical to a practice of emotional sobriety. And so we're laying a very important foundation here.
What is the belief or what is the motive that's unhealthy underneath your resentment?
I hear a lot of people criticize the 12 steps, that they're old-fashioned. I can understand that criticism. They were written back in 1935. Some people that are agnostic have difficulty with the word God used in the steps. For me, I look at the process that's involved, the forces that the 12 steps generate are so powerful that I think they're ageless. There's this interesting phenomena that happens when you work the steps. They create a charge and then a discharge. The first step, we're powerless. Our life has become unmanageable. It creates this charge. We're in big trouble and we don't know what to do. And then step 2 comes along and it says we have hope. That charge, that existential crisis that we have is resolved. What's happening here is parallel to life. We charge ourselves when we breathe in. When we exhale, we discharge. That's the rhythm of life. And the way I love to think about the 12 steps, it's helping us get connected to the rhythm of life so we can learn how to show up in a good way.